All too often, well-intentioned systems of morality grow far beyond the prevention of natural injustice and pervert themselves by merging into systems of law and order. There is nothing inherently wrong with systems of law and order. They are, of course, necessary for a functioning society, and to an extent always have their foundations in moral judgment. But law and morality have never once been the same thing. Law always fails to capture the fundamental human dignity embodied in pure morality, and sadly, often not only falls short of achieving something resembling that morality, but it actively defiles and perverts it instead, becoming a tool of indignity and inhumanity instead of a safeguard against danger. For example, does fundamental human truth have anything to say about how much a citizen should pay in taxes each year? I say definitely not. This kind of judgment extends far beyond the moral and into the practical, the kind of pragmatic estimations that, if followed blindly, can rob someone of their natural sense. In a sense, this is the crux of the dilemma. Going too far down the road of pragmatic practicality can trick someone into foregoing their natural decency if the argument presented in favor of the pragmatism is convincing enough to the strictly logical part of the person. Why not kill your neighbor and steal his property to enrich yourself, assuming there will be no negative consequences to the thief in practical terms? The greatest proof of this inherent goodness and moral quality to the human being lies in one of humanity's darkest chapters. In the beginnings of the Holocaust, the original Nazi plan for carrying out their ethnic cleansing was to use what were called Einsatzgruppen, death squads who would shoot civilian prisoners in mass executions and do this gruesome duty again and again and again. At first, they experienced great success. But even though they went to this duty with a terrible willingness to commit horrific acts again and again and again, these men had to numb themselves with alcohol and drugs, even indoctrinated with their powerful philosophies, telling them that this was a moral duty, that killing defenseless men, women, and children was justified because of the threat they posed to their own people. It still did not allow them to be free of what they were doing. Their guilt still expressed itself in pain, internal pain. They knew what they were doing was wrong. They lived with it. They suffered with it. And eventually, it was decided that these men could not continue. They would not be able to continue killing the defenseless again and again and again without suffering a complete eventual breakdown. This points to the inherent goodness of even the worst human beings, save those, of course, who completely lack a human soul, the truly psychopathic. But those who are not truly psychopathic, like the men of the Einsatzgruppen, no matter how willing they are to commit murder, no matter what scruples they might be lacking, there is still something inside them that tells them that it is wrong to murder the defenseless. They can convince themselves for a while, maybe a long while. They can deny that truth. They can seek to numb it. But eventually it will assert itself, either in realization or madness. This is the truth of this terrible chapter of human history. Consider the death camps, the gas chambers, the crematoria. Consider that this entire nightmare apparatus was constructed out of necessity because machines are not worn down by the process of repeated murder the way human beings are. This says something about the kernel of the human condition, because even though it was the conscious will of those who built the machinery of genocide to slaughter millions, driven by the madness of philosophy as they were, they realized that even their most seductive and terrible philosophical arguments could not overcome the fundamental decency that lurks in the hearts of even the most callous human beings. Their philosophy convinced them to commit terrible evil but their souls cried out in protest. Perhaps it was ultimately a vain protest, but the protest was made, and that is what matters. It is not the basal desires of the human state that are the root of evil actions. It is philosophy. Philosophy is the great traitor to the human soul. It is the lie that deceives and corrupts the mind, compelling human beings to do things they know deep down to be inherently wrong. Philosophy is the kernel of evil. It is the slope that innocent, credulous men and women stumble down in search of higher truths and end up in a pit of depraved detachment from all fundamental human truths. Philosophers claim to be the higher beings. They purport to express the finest aspect of the human soul, but in reality, they are merely sophists who are afraid of facing the simple truths of existence that we can all witness without difficulty. Reality is flawed. We are flawed, and there is no shame in that. Philosophers are driven to force the universe to obey their personal conception of logical behavior. They seek to impose an artificial set of rules on existence so that their minds can tolerate those parts of life that are incomprehensible to them. But this is a mistake. Reality has its own rules, which we must learn and come to terms with, but they are not human rules. Any attempt to overlay objective reality with subjective human expectations, with what is, despite all the flowery language and noble inflation of purpose, merely demands of the appetites, leads to terror and defeat. It is every bit as much a mistake for the philosopher to project his perception of reality outwards and claim it as irrefutable truth, as it was for Sigmund Freud to presume that his psychology was true for all human beings. Often, it is best to just state things as we see them, and make no effort to try and force it to fit in with any roadmap of reality. Things are what they are, and trying to make everything make sense according to our very subjective interpretations of things is self-defeating. The attribution of subjective moral judgments to ephemeral phenomena perceived in the world around us is a waste of time and will only conceal the truth. Human beings might scorn the scavenger, the vulture, the maggot, but these animals are no less alive and no less successful than some romantic beast, a wolf, a lion, prized by human sentiment. The only useful answer is the answer each individual can give in the face of a question. No philosophy, no cause, no master, no knowledge, no pleasure, no self-dissection. There is no easy answer. None of these things will solve the problem of our existence. You must be only what you are and what you can be, and understand yourself and the human condition as best as you are able to. This is all we can do to advance into the next era of time. Never react, only act. All false things in the world are trying to distract you, make you form elaborate plans of action and reaction that stretch forwards and backwards into time. This kind of consideration is essential to the sentient mind, and is the only way to make sense of the universe, of course. But less scrupulous wills are going to use it against your interests as well. So, that is why it's better to act and limit reactions as much as possible. An acting of your own volition and properly refined inclinations, your actions will always carry you closer to your own true goals. The goals of your own fulfillment and evolution will only ever be served by these motive forces, so go with them without fear.